Welcome to Rare on Air, the monthly podcast from Eurordis, Rare Diseases Europe. I am your host, Julian Poulan, and once a month, we will be exploring the challenges, experiences, and successes of people who live with a rare condition. In today's episode of Rare on Air, I am joined by Virginie, the president of Neuro-IFF France. This patient association, built by families and individuals impacted by fatal familial insomnia, or FFI for short, is aiming to raise awareness of this ultra-rare condition, found in fewer than 1 in a million people. Virginie opens up to me about the profound impact FFI has had on the lives of herself and those of her family members, sharing truly moving stories of loss. She discusses the difficulties of achieving medical breakthroughs in FFI and the challenges of living with this condition. Born from the depths of the tragedies experienced by her family, Virginie shares with me her continuing story of hope, determination, and perseverance. She talks about the successes and efforts of her organisation since its creation only 1 year ago and her aspirations for the FFI community. She also shares her advice for others driven to effect change in the face of an ultra-rare disease. Virginie, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So before I ask you, Virginie, about your personal story and your family's story of living with FFI, what exactly is fatal familial insomnia, FFI for short, and what causes it exactly?
So FFI is a prion disease. It's basically you have a group of prion disease where you have Creutzfeldt-Jakob, the genetic one, not the mad cow, not to be confused with it, and then GSS. And basically what's happening, it's a neurodegenerative disease. So you have a protein in your brain that misfolds and make all the other protein misfold as well, which triggers the disease. It's a very rare disease. There's only 5 families in France and 14 in the world, and it's neurodegenerative. No treatment today, obviously.
And what exactly does it cause?
So obviously you have insomnia in the description and fatale and familiale. So it's a genetic, it's in your family, in your genes. So when your parents are carrier, you have 50% chances to be a carrier as well. And so 90% chances to trigger the disease. And one of the symptoms is insomnia, but not insomnia as such. It's when you can't enter into deep sleep. And so your brain doesn't recover. And so then you lose your cognitive senses, such as the ability to talk, the ability to walk, the ability to eat, drink, and then it's fatal because there's no treatment and you die from it. On average, from the first symptoms, it takes between 12 months to 18 months until the end of life. And it's quite traumatic because when you see the person going through the disease, they are like prisoner of their bodies, but they can't talk and they just, dying in a very terrible way.
I mean, it sounds like a quite torturous condition to suddenly find yourself experiencing the onset of. Am I correct that it happens very suddenly? There aren't any warning signs, or are there warning signs that onset may begin of this condition?
So it's a good question. We don't know what triggers it. We know it's genetic. You can get tested. You can have your genetic status. Today, I don't know if I'm a carrier or not, for example. And the average age of triggering the disease is 50 years old. We don't know why you're triggering at a certain age because there's also some exceptions. You can trigger earlier. I have my little opinion on it because I've experienced the disease, but I'm thinking perhaps a trauma or stress can trigger it. But scientifically, there's nothing that has shown today that this would be a reason of triggering the disease.
I see. And so, of course, you mentioned that the disease typically triggers, I believe, at around 50 years old. But am I right that it was through your brother that you and your family first experienced FFI?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
FFI entered in our lives 23 years ago. So my brother passed age 19. So we don't know. It's an exception to the rule, I'd say. we don't know why he triggered at 19. And we know for a fact that my grandmother was a carrier and she passed from it as well. Back in the days, they thought it was a tumor. They opened her brain and they saw the prion, etc. And so for my brother, he started with, oh, he's schizophrenic. He's got a tumor. He's got this. And then in the end, it was FFI. So he passed quite quickly. Although when I was younger, I thought it took years, but we were talking about it with my mom and she was just like, no, actually he died after 6 months at hospital. So yeah, that started. We don't really know why he passed so young, but I remember the doctors telling me that he has an incurable disease and they said to me, I could be a carrier. I could get tested when I turn 18. And so I was 17. So I lived my life, got married, got kids. I always thought about this disease deep down that perhaps it will get me at some point.
It's clearly a very tragic and devastating condition. The fact that the onset came for him so young and took his life so young. If I may ask, what was your relationship like with your brother before he was diagnosed with this condition or before the onset began? Because I imagine the diagnostic process would have been not particularly quick for him.
Yeah, so we were very close. We are 18 months apart. He was very mysterious, not very talkative. He wouldn't share his feelings. But unfortunately, our dad passed from an infarctus. I was 10 years old, so he was 12. And so I remember mom telling him that he's now the man of the family. And so he was very protective of me. But something I didn't realize is that the disease triggered already and he had hallucinations. So he was always protecting me, thinking something bad was going to happen to me, like people were trying to hurt me. So I remember he put me in my bedroom and turned the key and I was stuck in my bedroom and he thought we were going to have a baby brother. Like there was a lot of hallucination. At the time, I laughed about it. It's not even funny, but I didn't know it was symptoms of FFI. And mom, he married very quickly and she told him he was going to be the man of the family and he didn't appreciate this new man. So he's my adopted dad. I mean, he passed as well. Sounds all very sad, but that was quite conflicting for my brother. And I knew he was upset about it, losing dad and then having this new man in the life and trying to protect me. But yeah, it was all the disease, but we didn't know. We knew he couldn't sleep. We knew he was exhausted. He had also some issues with seeing properly. So he had like certain specialized glasses no, he was like my big brother, as a big brother would look after you, right? Yeah, that was our relationship. Then he got sick and quickly couldn't talk, so stopped being able to talk to me. So it was quite hard. But yeah, I do have lovely memories of the two of us when we were kids. So.
Well, that's good to hear, even though I'm very sorry about how things progressed. Do you know at what stage of him having his onset, how soon it was that he got a diagnosis? Do you remember the news hitting your family and your family's reaction to it?
It was at the end. So I remember that he was, because of the hallucination, he was in psychiatry. Then he was in this room where he couldn't hurt himself, like with the walls being protected by mattress. It was really, back in the days now, it was quite shocking. But the diagnosis, I think for the doctors, for me, felt like, listen, it was 23 years ago. There was no palliative care. There was no such thing as a psychiatrist you could talk to within the hospital ward. But it was at the end. I think we had the diagnosis and he passed 2 weeks after. And we tried different things. I think mom tried a treatment from, the US, which made his condition even worse. And we did, I don't know the word in English, but we did acharnement thérapeutique on him because mom really, really thought he was going to survive this. And me too, actually, even though he looked like a skeleton. But the diagnosis, when they told us, if you went to visit him, you'll tell me, Virginie, no way he's going to survive this. But we were into that bubble of visiting him every day with hope. And I think that's what happens when you leave FFI for the first time. You have no idea. And so it was really at the end that we got the diagnosis. And I think, if I remember correctly, he passed like 2 weeks after the diagnosis.
Wow. I understand as well that sadly you have lost other members of your family and that you do have members of your family experiencing onset as we speak. Is that correct? Can you tell us about when and how IFF has affected other members of your family over the years?
So as I've mentioned, I lived in London for 12 years with my husband, and we had kids. And then COVID hit in 2020. And so my adopted dad passed from a blood cancer. So basically, we decided with my husband to return to Paris to be closer to our family. I wanted to look after my mom, and also my husband's dad had Alzheimer's. So it made sense that we go back to Paris. So we moved back in August 2020. And what happened is we saw something was off with my aunt. So my mom's sister, younger sister, she went to hospital in August, and we initially thought it was depression. And unfortunately, she triggered FFI and passed 6 months after her diagnosis in February 2021. And so I think it's at that moment where I decided I need to educate myself. And at the time when my brother died, I couldn't talk to my cousins about it because they were too young, and now they're young adults. And they were much more educated than me. They knew more about the disease. So I decided to educate myself, but selfishly as well, decided not to visit my aunt because I couldn't go through what I went through with my brother. However, mom, I remember her, she was like visiting her at any point she could. Every weekend she would go and see her. And yeah, we've lost her, which she was very close to mom. And my sister, so I have a young sister, she's 35 today, decided to get tested. And I think she got to get tested without really thinking. I think she thought my brother died from it. I'm going to be negative, right? I think that's how she felt about it. Worked out, she's positive. So she's got 90% chances to trigger.
Wow.
And yeah, I know. And I remember my mom's reaction like yesterday. She sat on a chair and she said to me, gosh, I have no chance. I have the disease, right? And I remember telling her, Mom, you're one of the 10%. You're not 50 or 62. So you're one of the 10%. You're not going to trigger. And if only I knew what was going to come. Mom triggered. She got diagnosed in March 2022 and she passed March 2023. So yeah, it's a lot of people. And that's at that point, I just felt like I need to do something about this, but I didn't know what at the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that. If I may ask a personal question, what informs your personal decision not to be tested? It sounds like a very, very anxiety-inducing gene to have, especially given that there isn't really much, like you say, I think earlier, there are only really suspicions that are had regarding what triggers onset, but there is no scientifically known understanding of what triggers it, which must really be horrible as something that hangs over someone with the gene. What is it that informs your decision not to be tested for the gene?
There's a psychological test you have to have, which right now mine doesn't show that I'm ready to receive such a news. So I think it's either knowing myself. If you tell me I'm negative, I'm going to feel very guilty to be negative when I've lost loved ones and I have my younger sister positive. And then if you tell me I'm positive, how am I going to react? And I've seen my sister taking life decisions, which we all deal with it the way we can. But also part of what I do with the patient association, I do have people calling me, sharing their stories so I can support them. And I remember there was a time where I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to find out because at least that way I can be safe for my kids. Or if not, I can, And this lady who just had her diagnosed on FFI told me, can I give you a piece of advice? And I said, yes. And she said, never find out. My life was much easier when I didn't know. Because at the end of the day, I might die tomorrow in a car accident, or I can, develop something else. And that would be life, right? We're all going to die at the end of the day. At this point in my life, I'm probably not stable enough or strong enough to know. And I think that's why I stick to this. But trust me, I have days where it's totally changing.
I'm sure.
So it's a tricky one. I think we all deal differently with it. Some people want to know and some people don't want to know. And at the moment, apparently, I'm not ready to know.
You mentioned, of course, when the condition started to affect more of your family members, you were able to, as I understand it, develop a bit more of a relationship with your cousins surrounding this condition, and you were able to learn more. How did it feel to be connected with more people who you could share the experience with and who you could discuss the condition with and learn about the condition with? And was that something that informed your decision to become involved in advocacy and founding your foundation?
Yes. So obviously, when my cousins went through FFI with their mom and my uncle, I tried my best to tell them, you have no idea what's coming. Please can try to protect yourself. It was during COVID as well. So there was a whole logistic to be handled around the visits and not, it was quite tricky. But I knew that because with my brother, I went every day with my mom. So you can't tell people don't go visit her. And also with my aunt, she waited for my uncle. The only night he didn't stay at hospital, she passed that night. They pick their moments as well, you see. And it's almost like, as to go back to your first question earlier, yes, my uncle was relieved. And when my mom passed, I was relieved in some ways because she was not suffering anymore. But no, we were always super close with my cousin. But yeah, what happened with her mom and what happened with my mom and our moms being so close made us even closer. And we launched the foundation together. So we're even closer and very complementary. We have an amazing relationship today. I couldn't have survived this without her and my uncle. But basically, she started this as well as my uncle. She said to me, I just hope my mom doesn't die for nothing. And I never understood what she meant until my mom got sick. When my auntie passed, my uncle decided for us to raise money for Prions Alliance. So we raised money once, and then when mom got sick, we raised money twice. And my uncle kept on being like, why are we not doing anything? And these two have driven that motivation to do something. And I remember the day before my mom died, I spoke to her. I said, Mom, you're not going to die for nothing. I'm going to launch a patient association and we're going to save our son. We're going to find a cure and we're going to save our family. And she passed the day after.
Wow.
And so I was stuck. I was like, what do I do now? And so a month after, we decided to call the association Neuro-IFF France because it's neurologic, IFF because insomnie fatale familiale in French, and then France because it's France. I really quickly understood I had to add a maladie à prions because we need to be more global because they are like very similar disease. And step by step, we've met different researchers, different people, and that's how our objectives have shaped. And so basically the key objective is raise awareness for FFI. So thank you for the podcast today. But also we are like a hotline. So I do get phone calls from families. I've already connected with the other 3 families of the 5 French families. And
wow.
also, no, I'm super I'm like, wow, well done in a year. But it's also supporting people into that before, right? Like you have the cellule de Creutzfeldt-Jacob, you have a hospital, you do HAD, hôpital à domicile, or you go to hospital when you're triggering and you have the disease. But what do you do before? So like me, I'm at risk, I don't know. So from now until something happens. So I think that's where I can focus more because I understand the disease from inside, which doctors, neurologists, people have not experienced. So that's kind of where we're looking at the moment. Obviously, finding a cure would be the dream, but it's not that easy. So like short term, that's where I would like to focus.
Well, even for a very young organization, it sounds like you're offering a whole host of different areas of support to your community. So congratulations. And of course, with your membership of Eurordis, welcome to our organization.
Thank you.
Do you get a feel for what it means for people to be able to reach out to your organization or just experience your organization? I imagine that obviously in rare diseases, a big problem is, of course, the sense of alienation. Have you got a sense of what it means for families like the 2, I believe you mentioned in France, having come to learn and connect with your organization? Do you feel like it means a lot to them?
Yeah, no, it does actually. So it's a thing I do at work as well. I always act the way I would like. For example, I would manage a team the way I would like to be managed. So it's the same for the foundation. But launching it and being a hotline and supporting families, I felt, and you're going to be like, that sounds strange you say this, but I felt so lonely when it happened. You know, I have a husband, a loving husband, supportive. I have amazing friends. I have family, but talking to someone who understands what you're going through make you feel less lonely. And this is exactly how I felt when I went to Faro for the Congress, because I've met Sonia Valad, who is an amazing researcher, but she's also a carrier of FFI and she lost her mom. And she gets it. She's got two hats, right? And I met all the people like this. So when I speak to the families, I get it. And that's what they say to me. They just like thank me for everything that I do. They tell me I have no idea how much help I've been for them. And also they ask me, is there any clinical trial? What's going on? And I tell them everything that I know because I know most of the things in the prion world. And they're also like thanking us for talking about it, for representing them, for not being shy to talk about this, because some people can be ashamed of disease of some sort, but I can't explain the reward it feels to be able to have supported someone. And we share similar topics. Family, broken families, living with this risk of, you're going to die tomorrow. You don't know. If you don't sleep well, am I triggering FFI? So it's kind of making them feel lighter with it. And this need, which is very interesting, this need of meeting, talking. I have one lady who got diagnosed with CJD and she WhatsApps me every now and then and she goes, any news, like anything you can share with me? I'm a bit low. My morale is very down. Tell me, what are you working on, etc. And I just like answer a WhatsApp message and she's like, thank you so much. That was so good. Thank you. Speak soon. And there's no trials to this. I don't know how to explain. I can't explain. I just feel like if only I had someone I could talk to when it happened to me, although I survived this, it would have made my life so much easier. So that's why I don't stop.
Oh, that's really great to hear. And like I say, well done for all the great sort of work you were doing in a very direct way for people affected by FFI and families affected by FFI. So, of course, our community is quite familiar with the challenges to medical research and clinical trials when it comes to finding treatments or even a cure for specific rare conditions. What are the exact challenges to medical advancements in FFI? I imagine the challenges are very much related to it being an ultra rare, extremely rare disease.
Absolutely. So as you know really well, it's just very difficult to conduct research due to the rarity of this disease. That's why we opened up to maladie à prion, because with CJD and GSS added to it, it's much easier. As I've mentioned, there's only few families in the world. And one of my goals is also to gather more families, because I think there's a lot of disease. There's a lot of people who don't know their carrier, perhaps, who they passed from other things. So there's this as well to think about. But talking about it as a group is the best way, I think, to be able to go somewhere. And I also know that Parkinson and Alzheimer's have similar prion mechanics than those diseases. So whatever we find on our disease, it will help these as well, which is actually one of the reasons that motivated me to launch the patient association, because I think it's linked, it's just like, it's not just prion disease on its own. But the difficulty in France, I'm sure you've heard of this, there was the death of a very young prion disease researcher called Emily in 2019. Right. And so it's very sad what happened to her in terms of the security checks when you're doing the job touching such a high risk protein. And so research in France is almost blocked because of that. And since I don't think it has evolved, right? But when I talk to my community, a lot of things happen in the US, a lot of things happen in Spain, things happen in Israel. So when we went to Faro, we met with Ionis, pharmaceutical company, an American one, who's using actually the research from Sonia and Eric. It's not a cure, but it's a therapeutic treatment which will decrease the protein in your brain so you can live longer with the disease. So we're following it very closely. They're opening sites all around the world, and we're very waiting for the France one to open in April, fingers crossed. But it's recruiting phase, and only people who triggered at very, very early stage of the disease are eligible to enter the clinical trial. But that's kind of, from the research, I'm not, I know it's hard, and I know it's not me and my little association who are going to be able to change the world. But as I've mentioned, short term, I exchange a lot with my community. I can call them my family as well. And I was talking to CJD UK, and what they did, it gave me a lot of hope, they have recently invested in a research project with Dr. Edgar Chan. He's a consultant neuropsychologist working at the National Prion Clinic in London. And what they're doing is called a research project Introduction Novel Psychological Intervention for the people living at risk with prion disease. They would like to show with a psychological protocol for people like me or my sister to be supported and to show that they've seen whether you know your status, genetic or not, the stress level is the same. And so not waking up being like, oh, I'm triggering the disease, etc., etc. So it's a whole research around a protocol to support these people to, make their life easier, but also, life easier. How do you live with this? And I think this is somewhere I would like to go and try to bring to France as well. So obviously waiting for the results. They've just started, but I would love to do something similar in France one day.
Well, that sounds very hopeful. So the final question I would like to ask you is, what would maybe be your advice to someone who is affected by an ultra-rare disease, perhaps like FFI, but hasn't maybe got a patient association at this point in time, or, is considering actually starting their own journey of advocating for the community, or even just sort of bringing the community together?
So I think for me, what has helped me is perseverance. I know it sounds... I got a lot of no's. No, you can't go there. You can't do this. We won't help, blah, blah, blah. Or no, like people not answering to me. But I don't know. I followed my gut and I kept going to achieve my goals. And this achievement today, and I know we're very young. We will be a year old in April of this year. But this achievement that I'm doing, it has no price. I'm not paid for this. It's not my job. I'm not in medical care at all. Actually, I'm in cosmetics. So very different. But it gives me purpose as well. And I'm not saying I'm changing the world. I'm not saying I just wish what I'm doing today is what I would have had when I was lonely and I was in a lot of pain and I was lost with the disease, right? That's what gets me going. I just wish I could ring someone and just say I'm experiencing this, crying with someone and just having someone listening to me. I think also my message here, if it's genetic or if it's familial or if it's like, think about the future generation. If you have children, for example, which is my case, I just think about my kids when they'll be adults. If I've ever given them this disease, I'm hoping if I die, there'll be something for them to save them. There'll be a cure, or there'll be families they can talk to, or there'll be a process in France or wherever we will live. Giving them the support that they need when I didn't have that support. So yeah, it's just like perseverance. I know sometimes you feel like you're at the bottom of it and nothing is going to make it better, but I don't know, we just need to keep hoping. But yeah, just keep going, follow your gut. You'll meet amazing people in the way, that's for sure. I can tell you I've met amazing researchers who are now friends checking in on me, calling me. I also had a conversation with Pietro Cortelli. He's now neurologist, but he was resident when FFI was found back in the days. And he was so lovely. And I just think you discover things that are beyond reality. And I never thought in my life that, this was going to be my life and I would be doing this. But it will fill you with much more than your day-to-day achievements, let's say, at work. I just, I can't explain. It's very strange, but perseverance and hope.
Well, thank you for that advice. And no, that's a really important message to end our conversation on. So Virginie, thank you so much for joining this podcast. Thank you in particular, of course, for sharing your very moving story and the journey that your family has gone through and the tragedies. But also it's really brilliant hearing from you how you've turned the experiences which you're still living through, how you've turned those into something positive, and which is really delivering something positive to many people's lives and making them feel hopeful. So Virginie, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Rare on Air. And remember, On the 15th and 16th of May, Eurordis will be hosting ECRD 2024, the 12th European Conference on Rare Diseases and Orphan Products. This conference, which is the largest patient-led policy-shaping event in Europe, will bring many hundreds of people together, both online and in Brussels. The conference will present a major opportunity for people to network and exchange valuable insights on how to achieve real progress on rare diseases. Visit rare-diseases.eu to attend the conference online and get involved.